So you're thinking about finding a physical space for your business, but wow, it can feel overwhelming, right? Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the world of commercial leases. We'll break down the key concepts you absolutely have to know before you even think about signing on that dotted line. Maybe you've got this amazing business idea ready to launch, or maybe your current place is just bursting at the seams and it's time to grow. The first huge question is always, where are we going to set up shop? And for most businesses, that answer is leasing. But here's the thing, a lease is so much more than just a monthly rent check. It's this complex legal agreement that lays out your rights, your landlord's rights, and honestly, it can make or break the future of your business in that spot. Getting this right is absolutely critical. So let's start at the very beginning. To really get our heads around leasing, we've got to start at square one. What's the real, fundamental difference between owning a property outright and just renting it? It all boils down to the kind of legal stake you actually have in the property. In the legal world, you've got these two heavyweights: the fee simple estate, that's basically ownership, and the leasehold estate, which is what you get as a tenant. Now, they sound kind of technical, right? But trust me, the difference is actually super straightforward. When you own a property in what's called fee simple, you are the king of the castle. You're the absolute owner. It is the most complete, most powerful form of ownership there is. Think of it like you're holding all the cards. You get to decide that property's destiny. And what does that ownership really mean? Well, lawyers love to call it a bundle of rights. You get the right to possess the space, to be there and keep other people out. You get control, so you can make physical changes. You get enjoyment, meaning you can use it peacefully. And, this is a big one, you get disposition, which means you can sell it, lease it to someone else, whatever you want. Okay, so what's a leasehold estate then? Well, that's what happens when the owner takes a couple of those rights from their bundle, usually possession and enjoyment, and temporarily hands them over to you, the tenant, for a price, which is your rent. You get to use the space exclusively, but your rights only last for a specific amount of time, all laid out in the lease. All right, so we figured out that renting gives you a leasehold estate, but, and this is a big but, not every agreement to use a space is actually a lease. This is where things can get a little tricky, and it brings us to a really common mix-up: the difference between a lease and a license. Think about it. You're walking through the mall and you see one of those little kiosks in the middle of the walkway selling phone cases. They're paying to be there, right? But are they technically a tenant with a lease? The answer might actually surprise you. And here it is, the absolute key difference. It's so important. A lease gives you exclusive possession of a space. That means you get the keys. You can lock the door, you can keep everyone else out, sometimes even the landlord, depending on the agreement. A license, on the other hand, is just permission. It's permission to be there for a specific reason, but without that exclusive control. So let's go back to our mall example. That huge department store at the end of the hall? Oh yeah, they have a lease. They have exclusive possession of their space. But that little kiosk? They almost certainly have a license. The mall can probably move them tomorrow if they wanted to. They just don't have the same powerful legal rights as a tenant. And that, right there, is a crucial difference. Every lease negotiation is kind of a dance. It's a dance between two parties, the landlord and the tenant, and they have different goals. They're not always working against each other, but understanding both sides is the secret to getting a great deal. So you might be asking, why would businesses lease instead of just buying? Well, there are some huge advantages. For one, you can get into a killer location that you could never dream of affording to buy. It frees up your cash to invest in what actually grows your business, like inventory and marketing. It gives you flexibility to grow or shrink, and you get to avoid all the headaches of actually owning the building. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. When you lease, you're not building any equity. That property could double in value, and you won't see a dime of it. Your security is only guaranteed for as long as your lease term, and then you're at risk of massive rent hikes when it's time to renew. And if you have to move, that can be a huge blow to your brand and your customers. And this is so important to remember. One size does not fit all. A tenant's needs are totally unique to their business. A warehouse tenant is obsessed with how high the ceilings are. A retail shop cares about one thing: foot traffic. An office tenant, they want a nice-looking building with good parking. The lease has to serve the business, not the other way around. Okay, let's talk about the actual documents. I know, the paperwork can seem really intimidating, but I promise, once you know what you're looking at, it's not so bad. We're going to break it down. The whole thing usually happens in two big steps. First up is something called the offer to lease. This is where you and the landlord hammer out the big picture stuff: how much rent, how long the lease is, which space you're getting. Once that's signed, it becomes the blueprint for step 2, the full, formal lease agreement that gets into all the nitty-gritty details. Okay, now listen closely, because this is probably the most important practical piece of advice in this entire explainer. That offer to lease, it is not just some casual handshake agreement. It is a legally binding document. That means every single key term you negotiate and get into that initial offer has to be carried over into the final lease. If you forget to put it in the offer, you will have basically zero leverage to get it added later. Now, you're also going to see the word schedules floating around in these documents. Do not just flip past these. They are not just extra info in the back. They're a legal part of the contract. They contain all the really important details that are just too clunky to put in the main body of the lease itself. So, what kind of stuff is in there? Well, you'll see things like a schedule with the exact floor plan of your unit. Another one will have a map of the whole property. A really important one will spell out exactly who is building what. That's the landlord's work versus the tenant's work. And of course, you'll find the schedule with all the day-to-day rules and regulations. All right, we have covered a ton of ground, from high-level legal theory all the way down to the nuts and bolts of the paperwork. So if you're going to walk away with just a couple of things, what should they be? Takeaway number 1, exclusive possession. Those are the magic words. That's the heart and soul of a real tenancy. It's what gives you control and the powerful rights of a tenant, so always, always be clear if you're getting a lease or just a license. And takeaway number 2, never, ever underestimate the offer to lease. That is your Super Bowl. It's where you have the most negotiating power. Get all of your must-haves, your rent, your renewal options, whatever you need locked in right there at the start, because it dictates everything that comes after. By getting these fundamentals, you're not just signing some paper anymore. You're making a strategic, empowered move for your business. So the real question is, now that you know the rules of the game, what are you going to be looking for in your next lease?